You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. You wanted it, you got it. A radio program that helps teach you options trading inside and out, basic to complex. This is Options Bootcamp. Whether you want to learn how to protect your portfolio, generate income, or even become a master of volatility, the Options Bootcamp drill instructors will break it all down for you. Now, let's get you into peak options trading shape. Here are your Options Bootcamp drill instructors.
All right, everybody. That music means it is none other than Education Wednesday again here on the network. Time to dive deep into some educational concepts and tricks and tips and strategies and all sorts of good stuff. And we always kick it off with our premier educational program, Options Bootcamp. Terrifying, coming up on its 10-year anniversary. As we all learned when we broke down the top 10 episodes and saw number one was from, I believe, March of 2012. So coming up on some auspicious anniversaries. Also this January, indeed this year, marks the 15th anniversary of this fine network. So the birthday, the 15th birthday of the Options Podcast, because we did kick that ball off way back in the primordial ooze days of podcasting, and have had a good time watching the medium evolve since then. You don't have to have an RSS reader. You don't have to be an IT guy to get them anymore, which is nice. Nice change for everybody out there. Let's see what's changing over there in the land of MTM, because I am joined once again for this second episode of the fun new year that is 2022 by the black-hatted one himself, Mr. Dan Passarelli, the founder of Market Taker Mentoring, what the cool kids call as well as author of one or two or half a dozen options-oriented tomes. Mr. P, welcome back to the program, sir.
Mark, I'm so gosh darn glad to be here. Thanks for all that. And man, what are we going to talk about today, Mark? What do we got on the agenda?
I don't know. I don't know if we have an agenda. Let's just freewheel it. Free Willy. What do you say? Just dive into whatever strikes our fancy. How does that sound?
I know that you are too organized to do that, Mark.
We'll tell you what. I will sound the horn for basic training, sir, and then I'll spin a wheel here in the studio. Whatever it comes up with, that's what we shall talk about. Sound like a plan? So fingers crossed for your favorite topic, listeners. Here we go. Time for some basic training.
All right, Boot, it's time to get in line. What you're going to do is learn. You're going to learn how options work. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. You're going to learn options trading inside and out. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. Basic to complex. Yes, sir. There will be no failures. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. Pull in. Yes, sir. Prepare to learn. Yes, sir.
Ah, yes, so festive here. Every day is 4th of July or Flag Day, or pick your favorite. You're an Arbor Day fan, we won't hold it against you. Whatever nationalistic type celebration you want to do, or in the case of Arbor Day, you really just love some trees. Whatever it is that makes you get you in the celebratory mood, we're down for it here on the old OBC. You know what else we're down for, Dan? I spun the wheel while we were playing that snazzy celebratory music. You know what it came down on, Mr. Dan? Take a guess. Take a wild guess, sir.
Could it be, Mark? Could it be dividends?
You have a spy on my wheel again. Do you have a little camera in the studio again? Is that what you're up to? How could you possibly know that dividends, and indeed special dividends, The bane of all options traders are today's subject matter, sir. How could you possibly know that?
I put one of those little squawk box microphones in your office when you weren't looking.
I knew I shouldn't have upgraded to the audio wheel where it tells you what it lands on when it spins. See, most wheels, you just spin them like Wheel of Fortune. You have to look at it, right? But this wheel, it spins and it tells you. So it announced special dividends. See, that was my first mistake. Now, I will remedy that for next show, listeners. And Dan will have no idea what we're talking about. All right, let's get down to business here in the basic training segment. Of course, the portion of the show we break down some basic, sometimes a little bit more advanced options concept and explain what they are, how they impact your options trading, maybe how you can use them, or in some cases, how you could avoid them in your options trading. And today, Dan is correct. We are going to get into dividends, in particular special dividends. You know, these things are interesting. They call them special for a reason. They don't pop up all the time. When they do, they can be real game changers, sometimes in very bad ways for a lot of options traders. Some folks will say these are the bane, the nemesis of options traders out there because, you know, you buy an option, it's a contract. You think that's binding, right? But then all of a sudden, the terms of that contract can be changed in the middle of it. And you weren't prepared for that. Nobody was. So that's why we say these things can be complete game changers. Dan, before we dive into dividends, do you have any memories from the SIBO or other times where maybe a special dividend came back to bite you in the butt, sir?
Oh, man. Well, yeah, you know, there's some of these situations and there's some of these situations where I think, you know, in the past, it was like, hey, there's a really big dividend. How's the OCC going to handle it? And like, you'd have to call them. Like, I don't know if there was a rule or anything back then. And there was this one time in particular where Ford Motor Company, which I was a market maker in, they spun off $20 worth of cash. And so we're like, well, wait, is this a special dividend or is it, you know, like, what is this? Because how the OCC would handle it would end up having a really big financial impact on all of us. And it turned out that was not considered technically a special dividend. And so, you know, like they adjusted the strikes and, you know, it was just a different scenario. And, you know, I would say I probably had that happen a handful of times in my career. And that was the most dramatic one, like $20. And the Ford Motor Company specifically called it a cash spinoff. But, you know, sometimes when it's ambiguous and it was a smaller amount, like maybe a regular dividend is, you know, 12 cents and they do a $3 dividend, it's like, well, what is it going to be? So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if you have any knowledge of how all that works these days.
Yeah, you know, the one that comes to mind for me the most, because for a number of reasons, it was a big one, and also because it directly impacted the option space, was back, I want to say, maybe 2010. Is that when the OX deal went through with Schwab? But it was around that time when Schwab got acquired OX, and so they announced a big cash distribution, so all the directors could get paid out there, and it was a pretty sizable one, as I recall. And everyone and their mother was hitting us up here on the network saying, man, this is free money. I'm going to buy these puts, and this dividend is way more than the strike for these puts. This is all free money. And we had to walk them through. Yeah, well, not so fast. There could be contract adjustments and everything else. And sure enough, that was the case. It was a pretty massive dividend. But that one resonates to me because it was A, big one, and B, directly impacting the option space. So let's get into some of that impact, listeners. Dividends are interesting beast, listeners. In fact, before we get into the realm of special dividends, which are a beast onto their own, it's been a while, Dan, since we've even talked about regular old dividends. And as we know from the numbers, there are new people joining this show every week and every month who are completely new to options. So maybe let's start there. We'll save you the effort, listeners, of having to go all the way back to episode 1 from 2012 and start listening and looking for dividends. Even though we have, if you want more deep dives, you can and are welcome to do that because we have touched on dividends many times over the last nigh on a decade of options content, but we're going to dive into them again. Bit of a refresher for all you newcomers out there. Dividends, obviously, companies announce a dividend. Usually it's regularly scheduled program every quarter. Maybe they pay 25 cents per share or whatever the case may be. And we all know how dividends tend to work, right? When your dividend is coming up, heading into the ex-dividend date, and when the dividend is paid, the stock price usually, I say usually because there's a lot of caveats in there, but usually tends to fall by the amount of the dividend. And then things tend to settle out from there. If it's a regularly scheduled thing, it's kind of done like clockwork. So it's not really a huge impact to the options. So what is the impact on the options when you might say when these dividends tend to happen? Well, of course, think about it. There's a number of different reasons why. But of course, in general, if the stock's going to drop, you then generally see the prices of calls drop and the prices of puts increase heading into a dividend. Now, there are other reasons for that, and we'll get into that now. Because remember, listeners, you've heard us say many times on this show, you should never, 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 ever exercise your options early, except for a few specific scenarios. And this, the dividend, may be one of those scenarios. Why would you do that? Why do you want to exercise your options early? Remember, you don't get the dividend if you own only options. Only stockholders get those juicy dividends. So if you want to get that dividend, you might have to swap your options for stock, which implies exercising those options early. And we've told you, hey, you don't get that dividend if you're an option holder. And also, you never want to do that as an option holder because remember, there's always that time value. If you're exercising your option early, you're just surrendering. You're giving away into the ether whatever time value remains on that contract. You're only getting the intrinsic value, whatever there may be, on that option. So it pretty much always behooves you to sell that option in the marketplace because someone's willing to pay for that time value. You shouldn't give it away. But in this case, if you have the chance to collect a dividend, then that is a time frame and one of the few scenarios where it might behoove you to exercise later. But still, it's not every time, listeners. And there is a nice rule of thumb that you can use to help determine whether you should exercise your options early. Because, of course, you have to exercise a call because you want to buy the stock. You don't want to sell the stock. You want to buy the stock so you can capture the dividend. So it's only call exercises that we're talking about here. Now, how do you determine whether you should exercise your call early? Well, let's look at an example. Because at the end of the day, your put's going to be typically in these scenarios out of the money. And so you can look at that put and say it has nothing but extrinsic value on it. It is nothing but time premium. It is going to decay to zero. So that put is a perfect snapshot, a perfect target for what the time premium that is left on your call is. So you can do a quick little bit of math and look at that put on your same strike and say, if the price of that dividend, the value of the dividend I'm going to collect is more than what I'm giving up by exercising my option early, then yeah, it's worth it to exercise early because I'm going to make some money. If it's not, then you should not. Let's walk through a couple of quick examples. XYZ, everybody's favorite, trading at $50 and it has a $1 dividend coming up. It's a regularly scheduled thing, so no shocks to the system there. You own the 50 strike call. You say to yourself, self, let's look at the put on that strike. And it's trading for 50 cents. Now, if you exercise your call, you're going to be giving up that 50 cents. That's gone. That's that juice you're losing. But on the flip side, you're going to collect a buck, on the stock. So should you exercise in this case? The answer is yes. And we made them at the money. You probably want to do these a little bit more in the money, quite frankly, but we try to make them very straightforward examples here. So in this scenario, yes, you did the quick math. The put is worth, in this example, less than the amount of the dividend you will be capturing, so it is worth doing. Same scenario. Now let's go to XYZ is trading for $100, and they have an upcoming 25-cent dividend. These are cheapos here. And you own the 100 strike call in this case. And you look at it and you say, the put is trading for $1. I'm giving up $1 worth of time premium only to collect 25 cents. That makes no sense. I will not do that trade. I will not do an early exercise. So there you go. Some basic rules of thumb, some basic math. Dan, I'm sure you talk about this a lot with your new students. This is probably a point of confusion, maybe a pain point for a lot of them. How difficult is it for your new people to wrap your heads around early exercise, when to do it, when not to do it? And do you have any rules of thumb or guidance of your own that you've learned over the years in this process, sir?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it is a little bit tricky because it's not something that you really have to deal with all that often. And And when you do, just something you're not used to, and there's extra math to do and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, we do talk about it occasionally, and I try and clear it all up.
And is it a particular pain point for your new students, sir?
Yeah, I mean, it is like just to get through that learning curve. I mean, honestly, what I typically do is I direct them to my book, Trading Option Greeks, because I lay out all the math in one of the chapters there. It just makes it easier.
Now let's get into the special dividend side. That's what we're here to talk about here, listeners. Of course, if you want deeper dives into dividends and how they impact options and whether you should exercise or not, again, check out the archives of this show. But it's a fairly straightforward rule of thumb. You keep that in mind, listeners. You look at the value of the put on your same strike. If it's more than the value of the dividend you stand to collect, in other words, if you're giving up more money than you're collecting, not a good trade. But other than that, that is one of the few scenarios where it is socially acceptable and also economically acceptable to exercise your options early. Let's get to the special divvy land, Dan, because that's what people are here for. That's what bringing all the kids to the yard today is the special dividends. Now, these, like I said, they're called special for a reason because no two are really alike, and they could leave a mark in their wake. The bane, the nemesis of options traders, call them what you will. These are different from your standard dividends for a couple of reasons. In fact, since the folks who make these determinations over there at OCC, Options Clearing Corp, they're the ones who determine whether a dividend is special or not. Let's get it straight from the horse's mouth, because they've had to clarify this. It looks like about 2009 when they made some amendments to their bylaws and to their rules. So people had a lot of questions and they were confused about when do you adjust, when do you not. So OCC said, okay, we're going to make this process a little bit clearer. So here is the official OCC definition of a special dividend, listeners. Get ready. This is scintillating legalese, but we'll get to the heart of it here. Cash dividend distribution will be considered ordinary, regardless of size, if it is declared pursuant to a policy or practice of paying such dividends on a quarterly or other regular basis. So in other words, if it's a regularly scheduled program, nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. Dividends paid outside of such practice will be considered non-ordinary. OCC will normally adjust for non-ordinary dividends. Now, here's the interesting kicker, too. Unless the amount is less. This is confusing. Unless the amount is less. Again, lawyers are not meant to write these things. Unless the amount is less than $12.50 a contract. So that's an interesting little caveat there, listeners. It's a good little rule of thumb you can keep in mind if you're looking at your special dividend and saying, do I need to worry about this? If it's not more than $12.50 a contract, you're not going to see an adjustment. So let's get to some of that. What are we talking about here? Also, by the way, you might be wondering who decides these things. Well, OCC has a special process. They tried to clarify this too because it was always kind of opaque. They put it to their quote unquote adjustment panels. And these are convened specifically for this purpose to determine whether there should be an adjustment, what the appropriate adjustment should be. It's 2 representatives from each exchange that trades the option. So these days, most options are listed on everything. So it's going to be 2 reps from every exchange. That's a lot. As well as a representative of the OCC who only votes in the case of a tie. And then they determine what the appropriate steps are to take on a case-by-case basis, which is, again, what makes this so difficult, because it is very much a case-by-case type thing. But a couple of things to keep in mind. You hear a special dividend is going to be declared on your name that you already, let's say, have existing options positions in. A couple of things you need to do right off the bat. First off, seems obvious, but you need to do it. You have to find out as much about that special dividend as you possibly can. When's it coming? What shape is it taking? Is it all cash? Is it maybe cash and a little bit of stock or something else mixed in there? Is it going to be just a one-off thing, or is it perhaps a couple of special dividends that have been declared for a certain period? And all the information you can get, listeners. This is what's going to arm you with how to prepare for this thing. The second thing, once you've armed yourself with some info, and the reason why I say to do that first is because then you need to go to the OCC website. If you just go to OCC first and type in your ticker, chances are they're not going to have a circular ready for you immediately because they have to go through that whole process I just talked about. They have to convene their special panel. They have to make a determination for that. So it's going to take a little bit. So if you immediately hear about a special dividend and you go straight to OCC, it's not going to probably be there. But eventually there will be a circular. So step 2 in your process should be to head over to the OCC website, type in your ticker, and if the fates smile upon you, there will be a circular describing exactly what's going to happen or perhaps not happen to your positions and the impact it's going to have on your options position. Now, the big thing you're going to be concerned about, obviously, listeners, is there going to be a contract adjustment? That's the thing that's really going to change the game for you, because you came in with X number of contracts at an X strike price, and that was your deal. You had a contract. It was binding. And now that contract may be changed, and no one wants a contract to be changed mid-game. That messes the game up for everybody. So you have to determine again if there will be a contract adjustment as a result of this special dividend. And OCC, they are the arbiters of this, so they will tell you the results of their special panel, their special tribunal's determination on this one. And again, that little bit of rule of thumb should help you, that $12.50. Now remember, keep in mind, this is options speak, not stock speak. So this is $12.50 per contract, not $12.50 per share. Dividends are usually announced in a per share basis. So if you see that, you might say, oh, $12.50 per share. That's a huge dividend. They're never going to adjust. No, $12.50 per contract. Remember, a contract is on 100 shares of the underlying, most of your standard equity options. So it's actually 12.5 cents. It's only got to be 12.5 cents per share or more to kick off a special dividend. That's a pretty low bar. So Dan, what are your thoughts on everything we've learned so far here, sir? I'm with you. When I was on the floor of the SIBO, there really was no bar. I'm glad to see that they have responded to that criticism and enacted one. What are your thoughts on this $12.50 threshold, sir?
For the same reason. I think it's really good as well, because you don't want stuff like that being just arbitrary and like, I wonder what's going to happen, I mean, to be fair, when it is a special situation where the company's, doling out a lot of extra unexpected money, whether it's called a special dividend or, cash distribution or whatever it's called, like that's really what the surprise is, but you don't want the, sort of second level surprise of, okay, wow, I just made or lost a bunch of money here. I wonder if the contract's going to change and I'm going to make or lose a bunch more, So yeah, I like that there's now a very cut and dried, a pretty cut and dried sort of rule. Like there are some situations like it was rumored, and from the last announcement that came out of GameStop, I think that this rumor is probably not true. And so not only am I not intending to spread rumors, I'm telling you that this rumor is probably not true. But there was a rumor that they were going to give like a special NFT dividend, which, if I'm not mistaken, there was a company or two that did that in the past. And like, geez, like how, the contract specifications would have to be changed for that. I mean, you can't adjust it by the arbitrary price of, a JPEG. So yeah, I mean, there are always, going to be weird special situations. And hey, I'm just going to we can go on and keep talking about how things are handled officially and where to find the circulars, but I'm just going to tell you this. This is what Dan Passarelli does. This is what I do. If there's something weird like that comes out and I'm like, oh boy, what is going to happen here? I literally just call the OCC. It's 1-888 options. And you call them up and there's a bunch of really smart people over there. And not only are they smart, but they literally make these rules that you want the answers to, what the rules are. And they are the definitive source. So give them a call. Bunch of nice folks over there, and they'll set you straight.
Well, Dan, we know you've had good success recommending people contact official entities on this show in the past. Witness the SIBO requesting new strikes. So yes, they do have that number, 888 options. I always send people to the website, but the number is good too. Just remember, your rep's not going to know until they have convened this special star council for your special div out there. But yeah, these are crazy times here, listeners, we're talking about here with special dividends. Well, before we keep going, Dan, I have a feeling, spidey sense in the back of my neck is telling me you may have a fun story or two about the days of old when there was really no set bar of $12.50 per contract, sir?
Yeah, I mean, that Ford story was the one that really stands out. But man, I know that there have been other stories, and I can just remember literally being in situations where we're standing in the pit and we're like, I wonder how that works. And they come and they drop off the circular because the SIBO would, like, somebody would literally walk around with a stack of papers and hand out these circulars from the OCC. And we'd read the circular and be like, what the WTF? This should not happen like this. And, it's kind of like, like when people are watching football games and like your your team and your favorite player grabs somebody's face mask and the ref like throws a flag and gives them a face mask penalty. And you go, what? How is he getting that penalty? It's like, because he actually pulled on the guy's face. And, like we would do that too. Like, what? How could they make this rule? Like, I'm going to lose money because of this. And, I think they make their best judgment of what makes the most sense under each situation for these things. And they do a pretty good job over there at OCC.
It is sometimes a thankless job. It is indeed like being the ref sometimes, or maybe an offensive lineman. You only hear about them when you're angry at them and make a penalty out there. But yes, they are kind of the glue that kind of keeps everything rolling behind the scenes out there. So the options market, everyone who's listening to this loves, can keep rolling. Let's get into this a little bit more because special dividends can cause some unique circumstances. One of the things, like I just mentioned, with the OX special dividend back a few years ago, Dan, one of the things we hear constantly whenever a special dividend is declared in a name is folks go out there, they hear XYZ name. It's going to declare some massive special dividend. They start loading up on those downside puts, right, Dan? Because it's free money. People just don't know what free money is lurking out there. So they're going to be smart ones, and they're going to jump in ahead of them. They're going to scoop up all those free dollars, Dan, before the market realizes what's going on. Let's go through an example of maybe why you may not want to do that. Let's go back to XYZ, back at $100, listeners. And they announce a one-time special dividend of $10. That's a pretty beefy one. That easily meets the OCC threshold. All right, so now you're this opportunistic guy. You think you're a little savvy with options. You hear about that. You're like, $10 dividend. Man, this stock's going to take a hit for $10. You look up, you see the 95 puts within the time frame of that dividend. They're selling for only 30 cents. They're like 25 at 30. You're like, man, this is a free lunch. This is free money. I'm going to buy all these for 30 cents. So you load up on all the 95 puts you can get for 30 cents. You think you just made $4.70 risk-free ARB money. No risk whatsoever, because can't these idiots see that these puts should be worth $5, not 30 cents. Only then, do you take the secondary step that we recommended earlier, which is to find out everything you can, and then also to go to the OCC website. Because if you did that, you would discover then, nope, unfortunately, this exceeds dramatically that OCC adjustment threshold. So they are going to adjust the strike by the amount of the dividend, which in this case is $10. So now you're going to see those 95 strike puts that you bought for 30 cents, expecting this free windfall of $4.70. They have now been adjusted down to 85 strike puts, which, as you can see doing the math, is still $5 out of the money of the new adjusted stock price. So instead of making a free $4.70, you just wasted 30 cents, however many times you bought these bad boys. So you wasted all of your money. So just something to keep an eye on. Dan, I'm sure you've encountered this too. People hearing about a special dividend and saying, man, that's it. I have to dive in. This is free money. Get in before the market wises up, sir.
Yeah. I mean, you always hear somebody who's got, some, you can't lose with this free money business, but it's seldom, it's very, very seldom the case. And like, look, if it was free money to you, then it's like a guaranteed, I don't even know what the word for this is, anti-arbitrage loss for somebody else. And so the OCC is not going to set it up so that somebody is just guaranteed to lose money because that person's going to sue the clearing company. And and they don't want that hassle. So, they try and make it so that it makes sense and it's fair and just and everything. There is one thing, and this is, and this relates, I learned this with that Ford scenario, which again wasn't a special dividend. It was a cash spinoff, but I think this would, don't quote me, but I think that this would probably be the case anytime they do a big strike adjustment, is if you're long delta neutral volatility, like long a bunch of Vega, you can just really get annihilated. So it's better to be short a bunch of Vega, because like the theory into it is there's no why do companies have volatility? Why do company stocks have volatility? Because the value of their assets change in value, right? They're selling more things, or they're selling less things, or whatever it is. But if they are sitting on just a pile of cash, the cash has no volatility. And so if they are dumping off cash, whether it's a spin-off, and I think if it's a big enough special dividend, but don't go trade this and say, I told you so, like do your own research case by case basis, because there's no volatility in the cash. The way that the model will, like once they do the strike adjustment, the way that the model will calculate it is like at the same volatility level, it will make those newly adjusted options worth less. And if you're long a lot of Vega, you'll lose a lot of money. It's a very, very esoteric and very, very complicated thing, but it's an interesting thing to talk about. Frankly, I learned because I got caught on the wrong side of it. I was the guy who was, everybody in our pit was, but that's an interesting scenario that I like to just throw out there every now and then.
The many different unanticipated side effects of special dividends and other types of things. So yes, as Dan mentioned, there are many different potential outcomes for these types of events. That's why they're called special. That's why they are very much unique type of events, because rarely are two of these types of dividends the same and treated the same. The good thing is if you're a holder of existing contracts, what is going to happen usually, if it's just an adjustment to accommodate for the dividend, then what should end up happening in most of these scenarios is that you will have the same number of contracts just at a reduced strike, reduced by the amount of the dividend. So whatever your percentage out of the money is, or in the money, whatever the case may be, that will remain the same, just around a new adjusted stock price. You may not like that, but that won't really change the game for you in terms of your positions. Now, of course, and the other side of that to remember, of course, is if you're out there trying to spec on these special dividends out there, just remember, there will undoubtedly, if they meet that $12.50 per contract, not per share, per contract threshold, which is pretty easy, 12.5 cents, listeners, then it's probably going to result in an adjustment. So those puts you think are free money, probably not. Just two things to keep in mind there. Now, as Dan mentioned, there are other types of things that could trigger contract adjustments, not just special dividends. So some other things you probably want to look out for if you're wary of contract adjustments. Any sort of corporate action could easily result in a contract adjustment. So a takeover, a merger, a spin-off, some liquidation, anything along those lines that could result in substantial cash distributions or other things like that, stock swaps, things like that, which could really mess up the game. And also the corporate action stuff can take it to the next level, because now your number of contracts could actually change. If you have something that results in, let's say, a stock split or a reverse split or some sort of other type of swap with other stock, or maybe it's a dividend with a stock component and as well, all sorts of things that could gum up the work, that could change the number of actual contracts that you have now, because now everything's changing. The game is changing. So these are things to definitely watch out for there. And also, sometimes people are confused. They come across an option that's trading out there and they see, let's say the stock's trading for around $20, and they see these options that have all sorts of weird strike prices like 11.22 and things like that, things that make no sense, that don't follow the usual formula of, even dollar strikes or $5 strikes. That's usually a sign that a corporate action has happened within the lifespan of those options, obviously. So don't be confused if you see that. And it's probably also a good sign that you should probably go back in time a little bit and do your research before diving into those options and saying, hey, what was the special action that happened out here? Was it just a dividend? Was it some other corporate action? What resulted in the adjustment out here, and what's going on going forward? Do I need to be aware of this going forth. These are just a few signs to keep an eye on. Again, every one of these special dividends is unique, unfortunately. I wish I could give you some clear-cut rules of engagement. They're really the best ones are that 1250 level. Keep that in mind. That's a good threshold for whether or not you're going to see an actual adjustment of your strike price. So that's the first thing to look at. Second thing is to stay glued to that OCC website, or indeed call them 1-888-OPTIONS, as Dan mentioned, because they are the arbiters of these things at the end of the day. So you call your broker, they're just going to try to check with OCC. So call OCC, go straight to the horse's mouth. That is the place to go. Dan, any other final thoughts here on special dividends, sir?
Oh, man, we covered quite a bit here, didn't we? I like that. Yeah. And because the word special is an important word in special dividend, to me, I just want to repeat a little bit that the most important thing is that any crazy thing can happen, from, giving an NFT as a dividend to whatever, so just always think about it case by case. Never make any assumptions that for sure what's happening. I mean, if it's just like a regular dividend, you can assume how it's going to be handled. If it's a special dividend, never make any assumptions. Get the information straight from the horse's mouth.
Well said, sir. So there you go, listeners. Kind of an overview of the secrets, the mysteries of special dividends. Threw some regular dividends in there as well. Always good to have a refresher on those, when you should exercise, when you should not. So bear that in mind. There are some rules of thumb. There are some guidelines you can look at when to exercise, and also when evaluating a special dividend and what impact it will have on you. But of course, at the end of the day, the arbiters are the folks over there at OCC. So you should stay glued to them for the information they will give you, not your broker, OCC. They're the ones who make that determination. Hopefully in your options trading career, you never get caught on the adverse end of one of these, listeners, but chances are you probably will. So it's better to be forearmed and prepared for such things rather than to just be oh my goodness, what the heck is happening? Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. You don't want to be that person. You want to be well armed, well prepared, so you can roll with the punches when these things happen to you, listeners. All right, Mr. Dan, before we go, if folks want to hit you up, they want to talk about some rating or anything else you got cooking in the land of MTM, where should they go? What should they do?
Make your way on over to markettaker.com. Market as in stock market, taker as in take what is rightfully yours, 2 T's in a row. And I would love to provide any service to you that I can, because that's my job, to help you be a better trader. And I take it seriously.
Dan, you got our secret club here all fired up with your talk of NFT dividends. They're all debating that now and the ramifications therein of NFT dividends. So you have given them some good discussion fodder. Well done, sir.
Good.
That is a cool idea. The more I think about the NFT landscape, the more intriguing it becomes for stuff like we do, of course, which is digital content. So intriguing stuff there. Who knows? Maybe an insider NFT coming sometime in the near future. In the meantime, you want to join that fun conversation in there, get in for the live ask questions, everything else for this show, for everything else we do during the week. Participate in our pro Q&As on every Tuesday, options oddities on Fridays, all the giveaways and everything else that goes on in between during the month. You know where to go. TheOptionsInsider.com/secret club is the place to go to begin your journey. Remember, it's just me and you talking. It's a secret. Don't tell anybody. If you want more learning in your ear holes, don't worry. Brian's coming up in about a couple hours here on the show, on the network, I should say. He's, of course, live to tape, so you'll get him on demand a little bit later today, listeners. And, of course, back again tomorrow with Twifo and the Option Block Friday volatility views, and for our Secret Club folks, Options Oddities. Then back again next week all the way through to another Education Wednesday, another episode of Options Bootcamp. We'll see you then.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's MIXLR.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/The Options Insider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.